Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, which is about paying it forward after sudden cardiac arrest, an honest conversation with 3 SCA. We have 3 speakers, Katrysha Gellis White, Rob Hoadley, and Joe Farrell. And we'll start with, see if anybody else is looking out there. We'll start with Katrysha. Katrysha is a passionate advocate for SCA, sudden cardiac arrest awareness, bystander CPR, and 24/7 public access to AEDs. She believes that everyone should feel confident to react in an emergency because quick action truly saves lives. Her passion comes from personal experience. 2 weeks after her 30th birthday in 2015, she lost consciousness and stopped breathing at work. With no health issues, warning signs, or apparent reason, her heart simply stopped beating. She had suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. Thankfully, 2 colleagues knew what to do in an emergency and ultimately saved her life. Inspired to pay it forward, she became certified as an instructor with Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada and founded Living Proof CPR training in 2018. She is passionate about teaching life-saving skills and spreading the word about the importance of bystander CPR and 24/7 public access to life-saving AEDs. She is now proudly working alongside the amazing and dedicated team at Action First Aid as the partnership's manager and Safe Station ambassador, supporting and expanding their partner network and educating people about the importance of 24/7 accessible life-saving AEDs. Thank you, Katrysha.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that introduction, and nice to see you all here. Thank you all for coming and being with us for this honest conversation. Joe and Rob and I are really excited to just be able to share our experience with you and hopefully hear from all of you and answer any questions. And talking about our experience is really the best way to move forward and deal with things. So that's what we're here to do today. I'd like to start by just sharing a little bit of insight into what happened to me. So a couple weeks after I turned 30, I was sitting at my desk eating lunch at an office building where I worked in Montreal at the time. And the story was told to me because I don't have any memory of it, but 2 of my colleagues did everything right that you're supposed to do to save my life in this situation. So I fell unconscious and stopped breathing very suddenly. And they called 911 and started CPR. And there was no defibrillator on site at my office, but by a stroke of luck, there was a team of firefighters around the corner from my office who had finished up a call. And they told me later when I met them that within 15 seconds of getting back in their truck, that's when 911 sent the call to them, and they were able to come within 2 minutes. So I was very fortunate. I was right place, right time, like many of the survivors that I've spoken to. And they ended up shocking me twice and restarting my heart. And from there, I was brought to the hospital in Montreal. They did all these tests and they determined that there was no reason they could find that I had a cardiac arrest. In my case, it's what they call idiopathic, so I didn't have a diagnosis. They concluded that likely I had an extra heartbeat that went in the wrong spot that caused the arrest. So I went to the hospital, was there for 3 weeks, and then was sent home and kind of told that I should just go on with my life. And I tried to. And after about a year, it's when I really started to feel like a lot of the things coming up for me dealing with such a traumatic experience. And I did. I started to talk about it in therapy and try to really deal with processing what had happened. And through that experience, I had thought, well, the best way that I can think to maybe thank my rescuers, because I really didn't know what to do. I thanked them so many times. I bought them a plant. I sent them gifts. I said thank you. But I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do something to pay it forward. And what I thought and what was meaningful for me was I used to be a lifeguard, and I thought, well, maybe I could teach CPR to my friends and family on the day that was the anniversary of the cardiac arrest to make it a not scary day for them. So I thought that would be something I can do. And so I got trained with Heart and Stroke Foundation. I founded Living Proof CPR training, which was just a little initiative in Montreal to teach anyone that wanted to learn how to save a life. And on the anniversary of my cardiac arrest, which happened to be actually October 16th, World Restart a Heart Day, I I trained my friends and family. And from there, I ended up posting about it on Facebook, and some friends of mine across the country saw this and they said, you know what, I'm going to do that in my office. And so they hired instructors to come and they got their staff trained in their offices. And I thought that was a great idea. And then a year went by and I kind of didn't do anything with it. And I thought, you know what, I can really do this. I can train other people. So I started doing this on the weekends in a church basement, and it really started to grow. And I started getting lots of requests for training. And so I just felt like this was a great way for me to pay it forward, to thank my rescuers, and to see if maybe my initiative could potentially teach someone else to save one more life. And if one more life was saved, I thought that would be worth it. Um, so through that process, I actually started to become more knowledgeable about not just CPR, but about defibrillators. So how they work hand in hand to save a life. And I saw this really interesting initiative that a friend of mine from university had done. They placed a defibrillator on the outside of their house, and I thought that was really cool. So we connected, and they told me about this company that was doing this. And they connected me with the company who was placing AEDs outside, and it was called Save Station. And so they actually wanted me to collaborate with them, and I started working with them and helping people plan these really cool events where they would place an AED on the outside of a building, and then they would do a really great ribbon cutting event and a CPR workshop in their community. So this was something I found a lot of meaning in, and I really had the same mind frame as the people that were working on this initiative. And eventually they asked me if I wanted to come on board full time. So I left my job that I was doing. It's a really scary, complete 180 in my career. And I started full time working with a company that goal was to prevent more unnecessary deaths from cardiac arrest. So this to me was a super meaningful thing that I felt I could do. I found that it's given me, like, there's a lot of passion I have for this cause because of my personal experience. And for me, it was the right decision. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's perfect, because it's not. And this is an honest conversation. So what I wanted to share today was that even though I feel so grateful that I get to wake up every day and do something I love, and I know I'm making a difference, the reality is that there are difficulties and frustrations that come along with that. There's up days, there's down days. And I find that I have a new perspective on things as more time goes by since my cardiac arrest. So one thing that I can share is that I did have another event last year where my heart stopped again, and I have a device that ended up shocking me and saving my life. And when that happened, I was heartbroken, because when I left the hospital and was treated again, my thought was, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want to talk about AEDs. I don't want to talk about CPR. And I felt really lost, because I just felt like I didn't know how I was going to go forward. And with time and with more therapy and talking about it, I did end up processing that. And I did come back to a place where I felt strong enough and confident enough that, you know what, this is something I want to continue doing. But that being said, is that what I realized is that paying it forward after your cardiac arrest doesn't have to mean that you're going to be placing AEDs and teaching CPR or doing heart screenings or doing anything to do with this. This is just what I've chose and found meaning in. But if paying it forward after your cardiac arrest means, it could mean something different to everybody. And that's what we're here to discuss today. And that's what Rob and Joe are going to share with you as well. And I think that there shouldn't be any stress or pressure put on anybody to say that, you know what, just because this happened to you doesn't mean you then have to go and do anything with it. If all you want to do is just spend the time with your friends and family, appreciating every day that you have, and that's enough. So I think everyone needs to just really accept that and realize that. And my message here would be that everybody will have a different way that they'll find meaning after what happened, and paying it forward means something different to everyone. Some of the ways that I've dealt with the frustrations and the realities as they come up have been that I really give myself permission to recognize how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling frustrated or sad or upset, I just kind of have to recenter myself. I take a little bit of time and And I know that I can come back to this. And that's what's been working for me. In my experience, even with all the ups and downs, even with the difficulties and frustrations, I do feel that my decision to focus on placing defibrillators and teaching CPR has been worth it for me. And there's two reasons that I'd like to share. So two of the outdoor safe station defibrillators that I had a small part in supporting place have saved the lives of two different children. So one of them was a 12-year-old girl who had an undiagnosed heart condition, and she was able to be resuscitated with the defibrillator that I helped somebody place. So that was amazing. And the second person was a young 16-year-old boy who was playing basketball late at night with friends. And I had helped the foundation that placed that safe station defibrillator in the high school where he was playing basketball. I had helped do that, and his life was saved. And so it wasn't just because of me, it was a team effort. Lots of people worked together to make these things happen. But for me, that's what I originally set out to do. Was I thought, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be because I want to pay it forward and save a life. So to date, there's been 2 lives saved. So that to me has been really worth it, and makes me smile every time I think about it, and tear up a little bit. And the second thing is that through teaching CPR, I also teach families about not just CPR, but how to deal with choking. And my friends have asked me to teach them how to deal with their choking children. And 2 of my friends have come to me after and said that they've each used the skills that I've taught them to save their babies when they've been choking. And they were just so grateful for that. And so to me, that's my why and my reason why it's been worth it. And I really wouldn't change anything about my experience. And I am just grateful to be able to share that with you. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to connect anytime. And now I will turn it back over to Mary, and very excited to hear what Joe and Rob have to share with you.
Thank you so much, Katrysha. That was really very heartwarming story, and the fact that you've already helped save many lives is really awesome. Our next speaker is Rob Hoadley. He writes that service to our country in the U.S. Navy and graduate level studies in business earned him the titles of veteran and master of business administration. A dedicated husband and father, Rob is drawn to share his message because he is a survivor of multiple sudden cardiac arrests. Among other things in life, he has now earned the title of survivor. Rob currently consults with organizations to place life-saving AEDs and interactive trauma kits wherever they're needed. Using his valuable knowledge and experience in the world of sudden cardiac arrest, Rob is an accomplished keynote and public speaker and advocate for sudden cardiac arrest awareness, AEDs, and CPR, delivering a message of resilience, strength, vulnerability, and yes, survival. Rob has motivated and inspired countless people in a variety of disciplines and verticals. He is a member of the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation Board Advisory Committee. He is a member of the Cardiac Arrest Survivor Alliance, or CASA, leadership team. He is also a member of the International Advisory Group on Public Research Collaborative. He's happily married to his beautiful and strong wife, Dory. He's also the proud father of 2 beautiful and equally strong young women, Kristen and Lauren Hoadley. So take it away, Rob.
Thank you. Man, I didn't know that it sounded that long when I wrote it. Sorry about that. I sound pretty important now. Thanks. So there's a lot of things that I will echo that Katrysha said, but I'll start with just the story that I have personally invested in this. So April 1st of 2011, I was in a meeting, construction meeting. We were going to see if we were going to pay out a construction general contractor. I was in the best shape of my life. I was going back in the Navy in that October. And as I answered a 3-part question, I said, well, first off, blah, blah, blah. Second, and then when I hit my middle finger to denote the second point, I collapsed into a full cardiac arrest. My construction manager caught me by my throat thinking I was pulling off some sort of elaborate April Fool's joke. Um, but as I started to seize and started agonal breathing, he said, "Rob, I put you on the floor as softly as I could." And he immediately started bystander CPR. The AED that came to my scene in the hotel where I was working, the AED came and it had a dead battery. So in essence, they didn't have one. I don't know how long they worked on that because I really wasn't paying attention to that at the time because I was on the dead side of things. And at about 4 minutes, a police officer arrived who had enough guns and ammo for Fallujah for days. He could hold his own in a firefight, no problem, but had no defibrillator to save my life. I waited until 8 minutes for my first shock, which meant that Tom Farley was doing bystander CPR on me for 7.5 minutes. And that is what truly saved my life, was immediate access to CPR and then a defibrillation from the EMS team that arrived at 8 minutes. I rolled through the ER doors at approximately negative 30% chance of survival. Was in the hospital, was in a coma for 4 days, in the hospital for 13 days, got out of the hospital and went home. And there were 5 shocks that day. So there were 5 different heart rhythms that needed to be defibrillated. So 5 cardiac arrests. Got home and well, I'll talk about that in the challenges, but then we'll fast forward to 2018, October, about 4 in the morning. I was awakened by my device shocking me while I was asleep. Didn't really know what it was. I thought I might have just woken myself up or started snoring or sneezed in my sleep. And like, I don't know if you can sneeze in your sleep. Like, I've heard people cough, but I've never heard people sneeze in their sleep. So I didn't really know what it was. So I didn't tell my wife. Big mistake. So at about noon, I was typing an email to somebody and just laying down on my bed, just chilling. And bam, got another shock. And this one was significant. And I felt it and I knew exactly what it was and had to call 911 on myself. And now I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but that's not something they teach you. And and honestly, I don't know if they taught the dispatcher that, because they were really confused that I said, "Hey, my name is Rob Hoadley. I'm a cardiac arrest survivor. I have an implantable device that just shocked me for the 2nd time today. I need paramedics now." And I don't know if she was ready for that or not, but I got them there. So that was what, number 6 and number 7. February of 2021. 2021 was kind of a rough year for me. February 21, I had a cardiac arrest sitting on my couch. The device shocked me, went to the hospital. Yes, sure enough, you were shocked. Over the course of the year, I had my defibrillator replaced because I was obviously using it. I needed to replace it anyway. So got it replaced in April. And then in on December 24th, Christmas Eve, I was in Mexico on a family fishing trip with dirt roads and ATVs, an hour and a half from anywhere that had a hospital, and went into what's called an electrical storm. And that electrical storm over the next 8 hours caused my defibrillator to shock me 15 times. So yeah, so sometimes that story gets me more than others, but the fact is I was awake for all 15 of those shocks, and that's a blessing and a curse, because the blessing is that with all those shocks that came, I was still able to maintain consciousness, which means blood was still going through my brain. So that's fantastic. The curse part of that is it hurts bad, and you don't know when it's coming, and the unknown of that is so difficult. I can't even really put it into words. I'm writing a book, and in my book, I describe the time I spent in the Mexican ICU in Mexico, I suppose, as a time where I felt the heat of death's breath on my face. So I didn't know how I was going to get out of Mexico. I didn't know when. They were talking about an emergency pacemaker replacement or an emergency ablation, and I was just scared to death, most scared I've ever been. Since then, I've changed my career. Well, in 2016, I joined an AED manufacturer to place AEDs where they're needed. No prior sales experience at all. But again, like Katrysha, mine was idiopathic. I didn't know how much time I had left. I didn't know when this is going to happen again. And I wanted to do something. I wanted people to have access to a defibrillator that worked, that had a good battery, that was going to give the right amount of energy, that was going to help give someone the best chance of survival. I didn't want to look at another police officer's face and see them feel helpless because they didn't have one. I didn't want that anymore. So how was I going to pay that forward? I went and I got a job selling them. And so I helped place a lot of AEDs. And so far, there's been a couple of dozen actually that have called me back and said, "Hey, Rob, guess what, man? That AED we placed saved somebody's life." And that I can't even tell you how good that feels. That first call, that something you did like that contributed in any way to saving somebody's life. Now I do speak publicly on resilience, on paying it forward, on making lemonade, as it were. Some of the difficulties, though, is that I know that at any moment, literally at any moment, it's been proven to me that even at the highest point or the lowest point of my chillness, right, my heart could betray me, and I could be shocked immediately, and I flash back to that, and it hurts. I get these tingling chills, and I think I'm about to be shocked, but it's not. It doesn't happen, and that's great, but it's really scary. And so, like Katrysha, I had to ask, do I really want to keep doing this? Is this really what I want to do? And the night I went on a leave of absence and left work, and I came back, and the night I was to start back to work, I got on a plane to go to an event in Arizona with the company I was going to work for, and that was the night live on TV. I watched Damar Hamlin collapse in the airport. In the airport, I talked to somebody. I was like, "Hey, man, I heard you train police on different training aspects of their job and expectations and blah blah blah. Do you train on AEDs and CPR?" He said, "That's crazy. I'm a cardiac arrest survivor." I'm like, "What? Me too. Let me hear your story. I'll tell you mine." And so that was two things. And then when I landed, I saw the place that I landed was totally outfitted with the type of AEDs that I was going to sell. So everything told me that that's exactly what I was supposed to keep doing. And I just recently got another call that somebody was saved by a device that I helped place. I now am with a company that only sells the type of devices that I support. It's a small distributor for Zoll Medical out of New Jersey called Team Life. Happy to have Jim Schatzel on the call with us today. He's actually the owner and the president of that, a multi-decade paramedic who's dedicated his life. He's a beacon of an example for me to keep focused and keep this going forward. Some of those difficulties are also being away from your family and just being tired, raising the awareness flag so often. But it's worth it for me to get that phone call and to know that what my efforts did actually helped save somebody's life. In December 2nd, I'll be on a panel in San Diego that is going to speak to critical incident stress diffusing and the importance of that in reference to the mental and emotional toll that it takes to be part of a cardiac arrest resuscitation attempt. Sitting next to me is actually going to be Thomas Farley, the guy that did 7.5 minutes of CPR on me. And bring the tissues if you attend that, because it's going to be heavy. My name is Rob. I'm a cardiac arrest survivor. I would love to help you in any way possible get through being a co-survivor, get through being a survivor. I'll cry on the phone with you. I'll laugh on the phone with you. However I can help in any way keep this paying forward, please let me know. Thanks for that time, Mary.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was really inspirational. We're going to next introduce Joe Farrell, who will share his story. And then after that, we are going to ask all of you to feel free to ask questions, bring up anything that you think is pertinent, and take it from there. Excuse me. Joe Farrell was the co-owner, founder of a physical therapy outpatient private practice in Castro Valley, California. He retired 5 years ago after 42 years of clinical practice. He served on the Kaiser Northern California Graduate Physical Therapy Education Fellowship postdoctoral program for over 30 years, where he currently serves as faculty emeritus. He is a 15-year survivor of sudden cardiac arrest, and he rescued 2 SCA survivors. In 2010, he was chosen as a 50 for 50 Golden Anniversary Survivor honoree by the Citizen CPR Foundation at the Emergency Cardiac Care Update. In 2015, the Greater Bay Area American Heart Association honored him as the Community Health Volunteer of the Year. He is an advocate for prevention and treatment of sudden cardiac arrest and serves as the vice chair of the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation, the secretary of the Pulse Point Foundation, and the advisory board of the Via Heart Project in San Francisco. He and his wife Edie are AHA, BLS, CPR, AED instructors and have taught thousands of citizen CPR and how to use an AED. In their former San Francisco Bay Area community, they helped place over 75 AEDs in local schools. His goal in his second life is to ensure that sudden cardiac arrest becomes a household word and a diagnosis throughout the USA and the world. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mary. And I want to thank Rob and Katrysha for sharing their very unique stories, and for CASA for hosting this webinar. And more importantly, I want to thank everyone on this call for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to the three of us. My story really begins on August 23 in 2007, when I saved a man's life with CPR on Incline Village, Nevada golf course. My friend Bill and I were playing some pretty good golf, and we heard some commotion on the 12th green. We rapidly drove over there in our golf carts and observed a man attempting CPR on a gentleman whose skin color was blue-black. After being trained for over 40 years as a healthcare provider, because of being a physical therapist, I knew this was not a good situation. Bill called 911 and urged 911 to get a helicopter in here to the golf course, since our local hospital we knew didn't have a cardiac unit. I immediately took over administration of chest compressions. Fortunately, this man lived and underwent a 5-part coronary artery bypass surgery that evening. And fortunately, I've been able to keep contact with him over the last 17 years. Now on to my story. My story really isn't mine. And the reason being, my wife observed all this. As Rob has articulated, and Katrysha, we went into a coma. On August 9th, 2008, I really died. I was at a colleague's home memorial dinner in Rockland, California. A couple of men I was talking to at this party, I passed out, agonal breathing, you name it, I was told. I immediately was lucky enough to have these 2 men start chest compressions and call 911. The paramedics arrived in 4 to 5 minutes, and I was shocked 7 times before my heart returned to rhythm and I started to breathe. I was rushed to Sutter Memorial Hospital in Rockland, California. Unfortunately, my wife was horrified because she couldn't ride in the ambulance. She was taken to the hospital by my rescuer. I went immediately had blood work in the ER. They said, oh, this guy is still comatose, didn't have a heart attack. I went to the cath lab. My arteries were really clear except a minor occlusion, so no stents. Then I arrested again in the cath lab and was shocked 4 more times. The cause of my cardiac arrest, as Rob and Katrysha have articulated about theirs, was unknown. This is interesting. This is kind of a take-home. The doctors kept asking Edie, my wife, what medications is your husband on? And she didn't know. So since that day, my wife and I have in our wallets and on our iPhones the medications that we both take. It's really important. Later on, you'll understand why. I was in the ICU for 3 days, underwent hypothermia, and Edie was my guardian angel. She was at the ICU every morning at 5 a.m. because that's when the cardiologists and doctors would be there on rounds. I was very fortunate. Edie has worked in an ICU at Mass General Hospital, and she knew how to run the system, how to work it. She knew the 4 scenarios that I was facing, she was facing, and our daughters were facing. Those are, I would die, be in a long-term nursing home forever, go home to short-term rehab, or I go home with no cognitive or physical problems and an ICD. Fortunately, I went home. I recovered from my coma in about 5 days. But on the 4th night after my arrest, I was awake in the middle of the night and by the head nurse and my wife, Edie. You're going, what's going on? She says, well, you're having a flurry of ventricular fibrillations, and the cardiologist that we're on your case is not returning our calls. And as a sideline, important, this man was going to discharge me the next day without an ICD. My wife was a bit up, and she basically fired the cardiologist. And fortunately, we had a friend in town who knew a cardiologist who took on my case. He explained to me in detail what happened to me, my prognosis, and that I wasn't going home without an ICD. 4 days later, I had an ICD implantation, and the next day, Edie and my daughters drove me home to Danville, California, an hour and a half away. So my survivor journey, what were some of the realities? Well, I kept thinking, am I really alive? I really had doubts. That was a tough thing to handle. The why me? Why did I survive and others didn't? Of course, I was grateful. A lot of gratitude to my rescuers and the paramedics, and who I next year went to visit. Was really cool. I thought, well, how long am I going to survive? I had the fear of an ICD shock, and in actual fact, at 10 years post-cardiac arrest, I had a shock that was related to a flurry of PBCs. That was a bit unnerving. Am I going to be alone without my wife in the initial stages? I was very fearful. And I think that that's probably normal for a lot of us, the fear of being alone. But I put trust in God due to my survival, putting the rescuers, the paramedics, great doctor. Finally, I got at the hospital to save my life. But I thought, how are we gonna move on? And we all addressed in our talk, paying forward. Paying forward is not for everyone. Paying forward is a unique, rational decision by each one of us survivors. I had strong feelings along with my wife, that my life was saved for a purpose, to help educate and save others from sudden cardiac arrest, and help co-survivors and families negotiate
sudden cardiac
arrest journey. After 10 days in the hospital, I was walking a mile a day with my wife. We started thinking about a friend of ours from our church who was connected with the community. And our friend Tom set us up to meet the mayor and fire chief. They got me connected with a public access defibrillator committee. We became American Heart Association instructors, and we started teaching a lot of hands-only CPR. This committee gave me a comfortable place to tell my story. And the more I told my story, the less I cried, and the more thankful I was for my survival. 5 months after my arrest, I taught my first American Heart Association class. Boom, a 38-year-old gentleman goes down in cardiac arrest. I saved his life. Wow, that was a real eye-opening experience. You know, 2 people I had saved with CPR. But granted, my class was traumatized. They elected to continue, and they really, really learned something. I would like to quote Dr. Michael Sayer of Seattle, Washington, in relation to CPR. Quote, the most common reason many people die from sudden cardiac arrest is because no one nearby knew CPR, Or did they know it? Or if they actually did know it, they didn't perform it. This is scary. We all have to step up in emergency situations, in my opinion. I want you to think about this. Did you know that according to the American Heart Association, there are only 18% of our population is trained in CPR? Well, this pushed us to change our PAD committee to Heart Safe Committee. We developed a 7th grade CPR training program. Over a period of time, we trained 3,000 kids a year over a decade. From 2009 to 2010, our Heart Safe Committee trained over 40,000 citizens in our county in hands-only CPR and how to use an AED. We made a difference, and we also put 75 AEDs in our schools. Is paying forward worth it? Not for everyone who survives, as I've articulated and my colleagues have. Edie and I think, hell yes. In our county, from 2009 to 2020, the witness sudden cardiac arrest survival rate went from 19% to 79%. That's monumental. That's a lot of lives saved because of our team approach, the Heart Safe Committee. To improve awareness, Edie and I have been fortunate to speak at 4 major cardiac arrest conferences. The CAS conference in 2022 was the first time that survivors spoke at a plenary presentation at a national conference. Brendan Griffith, Johnny Davis, Katrysha Gellis, Steve Tannenbaum, and I held a lively discussion led by Katie Daney. I continue to pay forward as vice chair of the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation, co-chair of CASA, secretary of Pulse Point, and on the advisory board of the Via Heart Foundation. Paying forward is not for everyone, as I've said. However, for me, it was very therapeutic, and I enjoy raising my level of participation in sudden cardiac arrest to save lives. If you're emotionally and physically up to it, I challenge your participation in your community to save lives and make a difference in sudden cardiac arrest survivor and co-survivors' lives. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I really appreciate you all being on the call on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. Another very strong presentation. We now welcome you to join in the conversation. Alex is one of our team leaders for CASA. And Alex, before we get going, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Mary, for the intro, and Joe, Rob, and Katrysha for speaking today. It's always a pleasure to hear from you guys and so inspiring. So thank you. Yeah, I am one of the co-founders of CASA. I'm also assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and Mass General Hospital, and all of my work really is towards improving cardiac arrest survivorship. So this is very important for me, and really just hoping to have a great discussion with you all today. I do have some questions for each of the speakers, but curious if anybody from the crowd has some questions already before I go.
And you'll have to unmute yourselves if you do.
So I know it can be daunting sometimes to speak up in these settings. So maybe I'll start starting with Katrysha. You talked about recentering when the going gets tough, when you experience tough days or tough emotions. As a psychologist, that's something that a message that I like to send to my patients, but I know it can be very hard, or almost a vague idea. What does recentering mean? So I'm just curious what recentering means for you, and what are some strategies that you take to help yourself become more balanced when you're having a tough day?
Thank you, Alex. That's a really good question. And I think it's evolved for me over the years. So the first thing that I did was I did seek out professional therapy. And that was something that I've done over the years on and off at different times. I've changed cities, so I've since changed therapists. And I've found that when I'm feeling overwhelmed with things, making an appointment to talk about it can be like the first step for me that's helpful. In addition, I feel like one of the strategies I've used was just to really just take a moment to remember. Somebody told me once that all feelings are temporary, good and bad, sad, happy, excited, everything. It's all temporary. So just keeping that in mind. So if I am feeling particularly like sad or stressed or overwhelmed or frustrated, just to kind of sit there and and think to myself, this isn't forever. So that has been really helpful for me to keep in mind. I have this image in my head of feelings passing like clouds in the sky. So sometimes it's sunny and sometimes it's not sunny, but knowing that it's always going to be changing. And just the major thing that I've learned how to do is give myself like permission to feel those things. So if I do feel upset, not try to push it down, not try to like say, oh, I shouldn't be doing this or I shouldn't be doing that, even though that's my go-to and that's what I've done for years, is think like, why do I feel this? I have no reason or right to feel these things. But in reality, I think we all do have the right to feel whatever we want. And that's really something. So those three things have really helped me. Hopefully that's a helpful answer for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love the metaphor of the clouds in the sky. I like also waves on the beach. You're right, our emotions are transient, and if we're able to recognize that, that can help us get through those more difficult days.
Easier said than done, but still, it's a work in progress.
Yes, and you talked a lot about acceptance throughout your own experience, and I think that's the first step in coping with anything difficult. Thank you.
But I will point out that it has been 8 years for me, and I mean that's a long time and not a long time, but it isn't something that like I'm still learning every day. So it's like a process. I've just tried to keep my mind open to this, and yeah, so it is. I am 8 years in, so I don't think anyone should compare themselves to anyone else. Just we can all learn from each other, and that's why these conversations are so important. I really learn from my friends every day.
Absolutely. I think to facilitate discussion, feel free in the crowd to maybe you can chat me directly or do a chat to everybody else. If not, I'll maybe keep the questions going for now. So Rob, you're in a car. I know a little about your work, and you talked about moving to sales, and that means you're traveling a lot. So I'm just curious, how has surviving sudden cardiac arrest impacted your experience with travel? The sneak peek is that I know you're doing it a lot, so clearly you're doing something good.
Yeah. Okay. Whew. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one thing that I want to point out just generally is that my most recent events happened in Mexico. And so in terms of that, with family travel and vacation and things like that, I recently rode my motorcycle from Canada to Mexico with the guy that did CPR on me. But prior to that, like, we're really nerds about planning things anyway, but I had the names, locations, and phone numbers for all the level 1 trauma centers along our trip. And we had a sat phone with us, which we hadn't done before. And we had different GPS location things for our wives that we hadn't done before. So there are different travel risk management steps, I guess, you can take. Going through an airport, like, can you carry an AED with you through an airport? Can you, should I go through a metal detector or not? Those are all concerns that people like us have now that have a device in our chest, So the answer is yes, you can carry an AED through an airport. It looks very suspicious under x-ray, so add extra time, because you need to explain why it looks like the big capacitors and wires are all hooked to each other. Yeah, I won't say that magic B word, but it's alarming. You should not go through a metal detector. Some say yes, some say no, but if anybody says no, then I'm like, forget it. I don't want to go through it. And they have that woof woof thing that you can go through anyway. So, but in terms of travel, Well, with my boss on the phone, it's really difficult for me to answer all these questions, right? But the reality is that there are still times that are the post-traumatic stress of it get to me, and there are times and moments and things and combinations of sight, sounds, and whatever that will bring back a memory of what's happened in the past. And if I'm traveling and I'm by myself, then that can be a moment of concern. And if there's an area where I'm traveling that doesn't have very good cell reception and I'm by myself and I'm driving, it's like, oh man, what am I doing about that? Well, so what I've done about that is I've limited the amount of time that I am by myself. Like we talked about earlier, fear of being alone, limited the amount of time that I'm going to be in areas where there's not going to be cell reception. And I check in with my wife frequently, and just to make sure, and to have people knowing what my schedule is another way that I feel like I have pushed back some of the fears of traveling. And honestly, my feeling of I get to do all this rather than I have to do all this is really something that pushes back a lot of that fear. Like, look, man, this is going to happen whether I'm sitting on my couch or I'm out helping save lives. So guess what, man? The extra time I have left on earth, I'm going to be saving lives. And so that pushes me through a lot of that fear. And then when it doesn't happen, I'm like, oh, see, I'm good. Let's just keep rolling. And my wife and I have committed to each other that we are not going to look backwards. We're not going to live in the past. We're going to look forward. We're going to live in the future. And if it happens again, we'll deal with it then. But I'm not going to be a slave to this. I'm not going to be burdened by the knowledge that this may happen again. And so while it is a concern and it should be something that's planned for, it's not going to stop me. It's not stopping me from living my life.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, I mean, I think you truly are resilience personified, and it sounds like doing the planning has been at least one of the things that has helped you kind of settle the nerves before you go on your big trips. I didn't know about the Canada to Mexico, so that's just amazing. Another example of how inspiring you are. I did notice that Joe, you had unmuted, and also Jim with your hand raised. Maybe we'll start with Jim, since we already heard from Joe, and then we'll go to Joe.
I appreciate it. It's so nice to meet people I haven't met, and that I've had the pleasure of speaking or listening to some of your stories before, and it's always good to hear them again. As Rob mentioned, as a 30-year paramedic, we have little snippets of touching patients. And many times, and especially over the years that I've been doing it, following a patient is a little more difficult. Years ago, right, I just called somebody and said, hey, how's so-and-so doing? And they gave me an update, or I could pop in or go upstairs or what have you at the hospital. It's a little more difficult. So know that all of you that said that you sought out your rescuers, the 911 rescuers, post your events, is there's a lot of courage for you, and because the emotions of that, I've been on each side of that, right? Meeting families that when things didn't go well, and then patients that things did go well. So very, very impressed and very touched by that. So thank you for doing that. I also just felt like I needed to share, in the last 24 hours, an 8-year-old in West Virginia was saved by an AED and CPR. And just about 4 hours ago, a 12-year-old in New Jersey. So I really do feel like you are the generation of getting through this education. Kids that are 5 and 6 now, they're growing up with AEDs like we grew up with fire extinguishers. It's just part of their lives. They're going to know it. It's in their textbooks. It's part of everything, and it'll be very natural. But for anybody that isn't in that grade school now, it's still this mystery of what this is and what it's going to do and who uses it and all that. So I guess I do have one question, but I wanted to thank you for that, because it means a lot as a rescuer. I can only get to one person at a time, and you're getting to a lot more of that. So that's just wonderful. I also you both, or three of you, touched on it a little bit, but it's a lot for your families. I'm sure that's a little wear and tear. And from the paying it forward side, I just wanted to see, you know, how that's gone. And Joe, you definitely, I think all of you have said that you've always had good support afterwards. So I'd love to hear a little about that. And Katrysha, I loved your cloud analogy, but I always think about this. When that cloud is having a shadow over something in my life, I know there's sunshine above that. That's right there and will clear up pretty quickly. Thank you.
I really am glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, Jim, because there's a saying, my family on my mom's side is Latvian, and there's a Latvian saying, I don't know how to say it in Latvian, but in English it translates to above the clouds, the sun is always shining. And so I was going to say that too, but I didn't. But thank you for bringing it up, because I have a little postcard that says that. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple comments about travel, if you don't mind. And even to this day, my wife gets upset if I don't share my schedule with her. Like if I go out for an extra long hike and I say, oh, I'll be back an hour and a half, and it's 2.5 hours, she freaks out. And just, I think to Jim's point about co-survivors, even at 15 years out from survival, my wife it's still hard on her, even though we team up and do a lot of CPR and training and AED and all that kind of stuff. It's still hard. And I know Rob and I have talked about this a lot in the past, is that August 9th, 2008 was the worst day of my wife's life, you know, even though I survived. And it's still hard on her and my daughters. I have a 40-year-old and a 38-year-old daughter who are just starting to express their feelings about my survival 15 years ago. So I just wanted to put that out there as a little dovetail to Rob and Trisha's comments. I think, Jim, I think one of the most joyous days of my life, besides surviving, was a year later. My wife and I went and visited with the paramedics in Rockland, California. And we brought in a big tray of sandwiches and, you know, soft drinks and whatever. And we sat for 2 hours, and they were blown away that we made time and to see them. And it was just a very heartwarming event to talk to them. And I also went on that same trip to visit the nurses in ICU at Roseland Sutter Hospital. So it does make a difference. It was therapeutic for me, but thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, if I could chime in on the family piece, I will tell you that the work that I was trying to do, I'm doing with the International Advisory Group, is centered on getting a questionnaire together to speak to or have answered by the cardiac arrest survivor and or their care team, whether it's a co-survivor or a caregiver or whatever, but to talk about what kind of care they got in the hospital post-survival, and then what are they getting after post-discharge, and what is that doing to their overall quality of life. And I've spoken to survivors all over the world, just like Joe and Katrysha have, but there's a consistent follow-up opportunity that we can really still do to because we've added now a chain in the chain of survival. The last chain link now is recovery, and man, survivorship is us. I promise you. I mean, at the conferences we go to, survivorship or survival stops at discharge when they get out of the hospital, when we get out of the hospital. And that's when the clinicians stop. And, you know, rightfully so, that's where their involvement kind of stops. But my point being, it hasn't been all unicorns and rainbows in the post-discharge world for me, or for either of my colleagues that have spoken today. And, you know, and Jim, if you ever did get a hold of one of those patients, you may get, oh, I'm fine, but that's a classic PTSD response. There are a lot of things that still get me, and I'll still choke up telling part of my story. But in terms of my family, my daughters, Joe, are still trying to figure out how to talk to each other because they were 18 and 12 when it happened, and they saw entirely different things. They experienced entirely different things. And P.S., Joe and Katrysha, I will tell you, and any other survivors on this call, I will tell you that you did not do this to your family. Okay? This happened and you are all experiencing it together, but you're experiencing it differently. But man, none of us volunteered for this, right? None of us got inebriated and drove when we shouldn't have, or whatever, and wrapped around a pole or whatever. We didn't do this. It happened and we're all dealing with it. So the survivor's guilt that Joe kind of alluded to a little bit is something that I've dealt with in the military, and now I'm dealing with now in my own way. But that survivor's guilt, and then the impact it can have on your family, can be very real. Before I hand it back to you, Alex, it's a shout out to Drew, who joined the call, because he was responsible for the video you might see on my LinkedIn page about the Abbott Gallant DR that's in my chest. And he came out to my house with a film crew, and they really treated me well, and it was really cool. So hi, Drew. Thanks for stopping.
So it's an absolute pleasure to see you, Rob, and thank you, Katrysha, for sharing your stories. We're a smaller shop, and we do a lot of trying to help get these stories out there across the whole heart failure journey. We were with a patient, an individual, just a couple weeks ago. He's got the heart mate free, so he's working with a pump. But sharing these stories and then what you all are doing from a community standpoint, I'm ashamed to say this. I don't know if my girls in their high school, if they have an AED, and if they're aware of it. So I'll be going there next week. We're going to find out, and I'll report back to you, Rob. Thank you all.
So we do just have about a minute or so, but I do know that some folks have unmuted it. Just want to open up the opportunity for any last questions.
Yeah. Well, hi, my name's Frank Jonitz. I live in Connecticut, and my sudden cardiac arrest was a year ago tomorrow. Fortunately, I was in Yale New Haven Hospital at the time for something else. And the other thing I want to say is that I work at the Hamden Public Library here in Hamden, Connecticut. And on Monday, we just got a brand new, up-to-date AED. So when I go to work tomorrow, I'm going to start working on my director again to get her to set up training, at least for the staff. And this is giving me encouragement to really put the moves on it.
Amazing.
Yeah, congratulations, Frank. Thanks for moving that forward. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank. That's very inspiring. Emily, I noticed that you also had unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to share with the group?
No, actually, that was an accident. But I will say that it's about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I met Ed Kosiak in Times Square, and he had this whole booth set up where he had like 30 mannequins set up, and he was teaching CPR to thousands of people that day. So he kind of drafted me in for a few minutes, for maybe like 30 minutes or so. And I taught a couple families bystander hands only CPR in the middle of Times Square, which is in the city where I live. And that is the first time that I've actually, I kind of like pulled back a little bit because I'm not trained as a teacher for that, but it was incredible to do that. And just like in that context. So, that was, I do other advocacy, but that moment, that event was pretty incredible. And yeah, I was grateful to be able to be part of that. So yeah.
That's awesome, Emily. Thank you for sharing that. Really warms my heart, buddy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you there? Ed,
Oh,
you're
it's
there.
nice. It's nice to see you. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you since I think it was in DC. So
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah.
It's good to see
Yeah.
you.
Great. Good to see you all too.
Lastly, it's important to understand that we keep coming out with new devices and new programs and new pushes and new sayings and new phrases, but the real movement of that needle in sudden cardiac arrest survival is going to be because of people like you that are training people like everybody else to do CPR, to recognize the signs of a cardiac arrest, to be comfortable in the action that is going to save somebody's life. 7.5 minutes of bystander CPR saved my life. That's what's going to save more lives. And when that defibrillation gets there, that's going to make it even better. But that immediate CPR to keep the cranial perfusion going is what's going to do it. So thank you from the bottom of my relatively broken heart for doing that, because Ed's an amazing guy, and I'm really glad you got to do that. So I can't wait to meet you later.
Well, thank you. My gosh, what a great group this has been. Thank you so much for joining. We will record this. We are recording the session, and we'll post it in CASA so other people can get to see it. But feel free at any time to reach out to Joe or Alex or I or anybody else on the team if you have questions, if we can help you in any way through CASA.
Yeah, so how would they get our contact information if they wanted to do that?
Rob, is it you asking? Yeah. Sorry. Well, if you're in CASA, it's at community.casa.org, and you can reach us through there, or you can also go to or send a message to info@casahearts.org, and then we can put you in touch with any other people here.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we're a little bit over, but it's been great seeing y'all.
Take care,
Thanks
everyone.
again, everyone. I
Thanks
appreciate
for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.